everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Scott Melbourne, and I am the Executive Director of the Schneider Museum of Art, part of the Oregon Center for the Arts here at Southern Oregon University. Please note that we have you all on mute, and please stay on mute until the end of the talk. If you have any questions, please type those into the chat. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing our special guest, Andrew Zimmerman. Andrew Zimmerman studied painting at Rhode Island School of Design and industrial design at the California College of the Arts. He is a MacDowell Fellow, attended Vermont Studio Center and the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture. He is a recipient of the 2018 Pollock-Krasner Foundation Grant. Exhibitions include the Drawing Center in New York City, Korn Gallery at Drew University in Madison, New Jersey, Arts Brookfield in New York City, and Mercer County Community College in West Windsor, New Jersey. Marquee projects in Bellport, New York, Deep Space in Jersey City, New Jersey, among others. He is represented by Sears Peyton Gallery in New York City and Los Angeles, and currently lives and works in Maplewood, New Jersey. Please join me in welcoming Andrew Zimmerman. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Scott. Hi, everyone. Thank you for showing up here. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about myself and talk about my work. First off, I wanted to thank Mel Prest, who's joined us here, for including me in this exhibition, Sensate Objects. I really feel honored to be part of it. And I also wanted to congratulate her on a beautiful show that is currently up right now called The Golden Hour. I also wanted to thank Scott Melbourne for getting all the moving parts together to make it happen, and also Sue Taylor for writing the essay, and as well as Maureen Williams for installing the show. I believe she was responsible for that. So I'm just going to move right into, let's see. Whoop. I'm going to start with art school in the late 80s. Basically, I went to the Rhode Island School of Design, and I was a painting major at the Rhode Island School of Design. And I remember spending hours looking at art books in the library and picking out anything that caught my eye. And I happened to find a few books on the Bay Area artists of the 60s. You might be familiar with David Park, which is the slide that I'm showing right now. Also Richard Diebenkorn, Elmer Bischoff, Nathan Oliveira. And I just was super attracted to how, the color and the light that these artists were using. And it might have had something to do with all being located in the Bay Area. So while Mel mentioned she was painting Chaim Soutine paintings in the studio, I was painting Richard Diebenkorn or David Park paintings. She happens to be, we happen to have gone to school together. We were in the same painting class. So it's pretty amazing that we sort of come back together 30 years later here in the show. So I just really enjoyed David Park's economical use of his brushstroke and the color. I also, like I said, really loved Richard Diebenkorn, especially the Ocean Park series. I knew they came from observing the streets of San Francisco, and I just thought the colors were amazing and the compositions were beautiful. And it was here's another one. Oh. I'm going to use this little clicker over here. The compositions were just beautiful. It was the first time I've understood what an abstract painting meant. It was I understood how, I just was super attracted to them. They were beautiful. In between my junior and senior year at RISD, I attended the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture. This is not a picture of me during that time. I found this in the archives of the Skowhegan School. This is one of the studios, however. But while I was there, I was a young kid, obviously in over my head, and I met a woman who was making installation art, and I wanted to know what this crazy, installation art was all about. And I sort of ended up not making any paintings that summer, and I just sort of helped her make installation art. And yeah, so after Skowhegan and after my senior year, which, by the way, my instructors were not very happy that I had gone to Skowhegan and come back and not have any paintings to show and not make paintings for my senior thesis show. So they were a little disappointed, but I feel like I learned. I came back with something a little bigger. Eventually, after RISD, I moved to Brooklyn. At Skowhegan, I met Byron Kim, who's a painter, and I called him up on my way moving to New York, and I said, do you know anybody that has studio space available? And he was like, yeah, come on out. I got one for you. And I moved into a space on Dobbin Street in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. There were literally packs of dogs running around the streets here. So anytime I went to my studio, I had to rush to the door to get in, and it was super sketchy. But it was a great space. It was really cheap. It was fun to walk into the studio because there was Keith Haring graffiti in the hallway. So I was reminded of, just how cool it was every time I walked in. So I was working for art handlers, and I was also working for artists at this time, including Donald Sultan for about 4 years. He's an artist from the 80s. If you're, my studio looked a little bit like this. I mean, this was an installation I had made using a lot of found materials. By this time, I was discovered Richard Tuttle. I think I saw a show at some gallery, and I was just really excited about how he used materials. And there was also so much to see on the streets of New York. There was just garbage, there was graffiti, there was spray paint everywhere. It was just a rich environment. And these materials were really cheap. At the time, I didn't have much money. Here's a close-up of one of the pieces in that installation. And here I begin to explore the relationship between painting and sculpture. I came at, I was always a painter through RISD, and then kind of got sidetracked in Skowhegan. And then, but, it's always been in my blood. I've always looked at painting, but I wanted to get my hands dirty with a little bit of, some plywood, for example. Blue boat with red dot, another small piece. I'm really interested in the this little, always putting on a bunch of paint on the tip of my objects, because then it's a painting, right? Yeah, here's a really long black dowel that I had mixed some beeswax in with the oil paint and dripped on, and then stuck it on the wall. I was just kind of trying to do the craziest stuff I could think of doing at the time. Here's another here is a Richard Tuttle piece. It's called Cloth Octagonal. And I responded to the language of minimalism. I really thought it looked important. It was like capital A with an art, something was important about this. But whereas Donald Judd was making these super tight, boxes. I just couldn't, I didn't find any place to enter into them. So, but this octagonal by Richard Tuttle was just, oh, it's, it's soft. It was created by hand. The wiggles, the unevenness of the shape was really attractive to me. An example in painting would be like Philip Guston. Here, I think the next slide. So, you have a lot of wiggles over the eyes. The line is just really like, it's almost like he was just had 5 cups of coffee and he was just sort of making these paintings. And I just find the quality and gesture of the line to be really, really attractive. Another painter I was looking at the time is Mary Heilman. She actually has a show up right now in the city at 303 Gallery. And she's another sort of minimalist artist that you could see the hand, you could see her hand in it. She wasn't trying to hide much. She was just letting all the mistakes come through. Here's another one. This is from her most recent show. It's up right now. And just how expressive those shapes are. Those colorful shapes on that black background is really, really nice. So here's another piece from that series that I was doing on Dobbin Street. A lot of my work at that time was just painted on the wall, and then, I just have mostly images of the work. And here I cut a half circle out of wood and then glued it on the wall, and then took paint and just sort of, outlined the bottom of the shape. And I was very interested in the idea of the viewer understanding the fabrication of the illusion I was trying to make. So it was like a joke that we were both in on, and it was super obvious. I also enjoy the grain of the wood and the circles of the wood, sort of mimicking the painting, the round blue circle. Here's another one from that time. Here it was obvious that a pink dot can be painted on a wall by dipping the head of a nail into the paint and then pressing on the wall and making those pink dots. And I wanted to the viewer to be in on the process of how the dots were painted by actually including the nail. So there were just these little, little painting puns or something that I was making at the time. And using minimal or throwaway materials. During my experimentation on Dobbin Street, I discovered the drinking straw as a tool or as a medium for making work. I realized that if you packed a bunch of drinking straws together and used a propane torch to melt the fronts and back, and then you pulled away the form that was holding the straws together, you'd have a solid, block of straws. So it was quite exciting at first. I thought I was, on to something huge, and I was just going to be a superstar. And I made a bunch of these thinking like they were just going to fly off the shelves. And then I just sort of filled up my studio with them and realized that, you have to be aware that if you're making bulky art, you have to know where to store it and have a place to store it. So they became bulky. Also, unfortunately, at this while making these pieces, I had one of them catch on fire. I didn't realize it was on fire until I went out for lunch to get a sandwich, and I came back and it must have been smoldering because it caused the sprinkler alarms to come on, and filled up my studio with water and the building with water. And the event was super traumatic for me. I lost everything in the studio, and basically just my girlfriend at the time, Sarah, who's my wife right now, we decided to pack up our things and move out of New York. It was just this rash decision you make in your 20s. So we moved to San Francisco. We decided to go on an adventure. I wanted to learn some new skills so I could get a real job. I had been working for artists and art movers, and I wanted something different. So we moved to San Francisco, and I went to school. Started a program at CCAC, California College of Arts, in industrial design. And I started to learn the process of design, which was very different than the art process. So we were given a design brief, and you were to figure out, what kind of problems needed to be solved, and you would draw and make models, and it was a really interesting experience, sort of diving into this much more clinical approach to making objects. It taught me to look at form in a new way too. I started looking at forms as design, design forms rather than just forms that happen to take form from an art process, if that makes any sense. So we spent about 5 years living in the Bay Area, and I was working for various design firms, and my wife decided to go back to graduate school. So we moved to New Haven, Connecticut, where she went to Yale and started an MFA program in graphic design. At the time I was making art secretly in the basement of our apartment in New Haven. And then one day she surprised me with renting a studio space for me in a building called Erector Square. And it was a building that it was where the Erector toys were created. So it was quite interesting. And in that building, Jessica Stockholder had a studio. And this is a Jessica Stockholder piece. It's funny because I was always, thinking about her work, and to have her, be right down the hall was pretty exciting. During this time, I discovered the jigsaw. Here's an image of my jigsaw. I really got use out of this thing. It was it basically enabled me to draw without using a pencil or a brush. So it was the tool that sort of introduced the idea of sculpture, but in a linear form. You'll sort of see in the slides coming up. Mel mentioned using one brush for her paintings, and my one brush was my jigsaw here. I think for some artists, limiting the number of tools in the studio can be liberating for the work because it creates new and unexpected avenues for the work to go. Limitations breed innovations, I always told myself. Even today, when I introduce another tool into my studio, I always sort of think, okay, well, I'm ready for how it's going to affect my work later on as I learn how to use the tool. So here's an example of, cutting wood, gluing wood, cutting it again, gluing it again, painting it. So it was take an object, do something to it, do something else to it, and, you come up with something a little surprising. So we were in New Haven for about 3 years, and it was finally time. My wife graduated from the program, and we had our first little girl, Della. I was still using the jigsaw, and I was spraying my pieces at that time with an HVLP gun, high volume, low pressure gun, using acrylic paint. And these the work was about expansion, and after all the pieces were cut, so this is one panel of MDF. It was just a square panel. And do people see the red marker there? So I would cut these strips and then separate them by about 1/2 inch, and then glue them back down on a substrate. And then what happened is depending on the angle or the pattern you were cutting, it would, as you spread those pieces out, it would create a shape, and you would get these grooves. So this one, you don't really see it so much in this one, but the shapes are going that way and that way. Yeah, I started making these pieces. I had a show that I was trying to make work for, and sort of started making these. And then here's a smaller one. And, we were talking about the wobbly, wiggly lines of Richard Tuttle and Philip Guston, and it's something I was definitely encouraging in my cuts. Here's a piece that, you could see, this angle, the pieces are going out that way. This piece I sprayed orange, and I sprayed the grooves orange, and then I rolled the white with a fine foam roller. There's another one. And I kind of got into the how three-dimensional they looked, even though they were totally flat. Here's one of just sort of pushing the boundaries of the wobbliness of the line, and being able to glue those pieces together and make a piece. And then I had my show, 2015. And I realized that I had sort of come to an end with these pieces. The limitations of the format became clear to me. I could only create a certain number of patterns, and I was starting to feel boxed into the format and to this work. So I was starting to search out, look around for some new inspiration. And at the time, I was still working as a designer in the city at this point in New York City, and I had enough. I was thinking about art. I couldn't not think about it. It was just kind of there, and here I was in a design office, having to sit in front of a computer all day. It was really difficult. But I was lucky enough to get a job as an art handler at MoMA, and this is the garden there. It was truly an art history education to be around so much art under such ideal circumstances. I was installing the work, packing the work, just moving it around, working with curators. It was really a beautiful place to work. Climate controlled, perfect temperature, humidity. The people that work in this museum are preserved forever. This is how we move the paintings around. It's called a picture truck, and there's a Jasper Johns on it. And this is sort of an everyday scene down in the basement of where we stored a lot of the work. So it was really an opportunity to get up close and personal with an amazing collection. To look at the back of the paintings, to handle them, to take pictures, to get up real close to them. And I really did get to know, the collection. It was a great job. There's Miro's Moonbird in the freight elevator. We were now living in Maplewood, New Jersey. We moved from New York, and we found a house that had a garage attached to the house that I thought would work well as a studio. And we had our second daughter. So this is Daphne. My studio is about 9 feet wide by 30 feet long. It's probably similar to the dimensions of a small submarine, I'm thinking, like one of those small old-timey submarines. This is what my studio looked like about 10 years ago. Same studio I'm in today, but it's changed a lot. I've organized it about 10 different times. But I feel like the limitations of the space have given me some innovative ideas, because making a large piece, for example, I learned that they needed to be modular, otherwise they wouldn't fit in my space. So they're modular, which is a little unusual. Whoop. Here's a Richard Tuttle, another Richard Tuttle. This is a piece that's owned by the Museum of Modern Art, and it's called The Alphabet. I was lucky enough to install it at some point, and I really responded to the material, the industrial material, for one, the sheet metal. And I love the various shapes, the rich variety of shapes, and yet they all worked really well together. They were all speaking to each other, almost like an alphabet, a typeface. Here's a piece I made at the time. I'm still working, still making groove paintings, but those are sort of petering out a little bit. It's a small one. This one I cut grooves, I glued it down, and then I cut another set of grooves and glued it down on another substrate. So you have this groove and then a much deeper groove here. And then I painted it with high gloss enamel yellow. Here's a whole painting. Just exploring forms and what a painting could be. Pyramid painting. This was, I had to drill these holes at the bottom to put my jigsaw in and then spread the pieces out. So I kind of liked that, those little holes at the bottom. This is another piece. I was working with texture, and I cut the panel out to look like a box, but it was flat. Near the end of my time at MoMA, I was given the opportunity to work on the Matisse show. And for some reason, I hadn't really been familiar with his cutout series, which were most of the work he did near the end of his life. So while I was working on it, I was just like, flabbergasted. I was just so blown away by these pieces, the colors, the design. They were amazing. And I got to spend, 6 weeks just hanging these pieces in the museum. Here was an artist that was using a scissor to cut paper, and I could relate to that because I was using the jigsaw at the time. Here's my daughter on Bring Your Daughter to Work Day, and I had her cleaning the jazz series. Here's a large piece owned by MoMA. I think it's called like the Turtle or something like that. It's really huge. Finally, I left MoMA. Here's my surprise party, my going away party, sorry. And it was a great group of people, super funny, and it was a great experience. I spent about 11 years working there, and these were all people that were all artists, musicians, great artists, musicians, and they all had their own stories. And it was, yeah, it was a great experience. Let's see, just before I left MoMA in 2017, I went to the Vermont Studio Center it's an artist residency. And then about a year later, I went to MacDowell and the MacDowell colony. This is Alexander's studio in the MacDowell colony. And this was my studio. And when I first approached it, I was pinching myself because here I was in the woods of New Hampshire, and this was my own building that I could use all to myself. It was really exciting. And when I walked into the studio space, there were these plaques on the wall that the artists, as the years go on, they sign the plaques. Who's been there, and Milton Avery had signed it in in the 1940s. So I was just like, wow, the imposter syndrome for sure is real for me at this point. These are some collages I was doing there. I decided to just stick to collage at MacDowell just to keep the material simple. I did a lot of them, and I didn't really bring home much. I ended up destroying them somehow. I don't know what was in my head, but and then this is from Vermont Studio Center, which was before MacDowell, and just working out collage. And here's a show of collages I was hanging. There were paintings in this show. This is at Sears Peyton Gallery. And this wall was just sort of the wall of collages. This is a small piece that I was in my studio. I had been cutting a lot of shapes, and these were all pre-painted. This is all pre-painted wood. So I just sort of had material lying around that had all been painted, these colors. And the shapes would just I would just sort of put shapes together. And if something worked, I would glue them together. So sort of like found paintings, found pieces from discarded scraps. Here's a small one. And I continue to try to use various kinds of paint applications. This piece has some spray paint, some automotive paint, some acrylic paint. Yeah, so I became interested in I am interested in the intersection of mass production and the handmade object. And I became very interested in the color system used by automobile companies. And I was also interested in working with local craftspeople, just getting out of my studio and seeing what other people could bring to my work if I paid them money. But the colors created by the automobile industry are design colors to sell cars. And I just thought it was a really interesting system that had already existed that I could appropriate for my own use. the colors have specific names, like blue ciel and bronze met, and the colors have codes. So 250 is blue Sirtaki nacre. And so I would prepare my panels and then bring in the panels with a 250 code on them, and then they would get sprayed that color. And then often the name of the color would be the title of the piece. So it was just a sort of interesting way to marry mass production and the car industry with my work. Even though I'm not exactly interested in cars particularly, I was interested in the color system. This is a close-up. So I worked out a way to prime the wood. I use poplar, and I prime the wood to make it really smooth. And then the boards get painted, and then I cut the boards after they're painted. And I think having an interest in industrial or unconventional artist materials enabled me to sort of make the mental leap to have automotive paint used as surfaces for my pieces. And the contrast of the painted surface with the wood was something I was attracted to. So here's my first book piece, and I started making these pieces soon after I left MoMA, and it was a format that I could use over and over in different scales. So let's see, this one was pretty small. It's probably like 14 inches. And then here's a white one, and the pieces, these individual pieces got wider, then some are thinner. And it was just an exercise in exploring the variety of shapes of pieces that could go on the left and on the right, and then split down the middle. And it was a pretty simple format. This is a similar format, just much more vertical. And pieces got bigger. 2 pieces on the left, 3 pieces on the right. Pretty simple, different color. Here's a large piece. The large pieces are made with they're hollow panels that I create. The smaller pieces are solid wood. These are hollow because they would be super heavy and warp if I didn't make them hollow. So they're almost constructed like a hollow core door is. There are 2 thin pieces of Baltic birch on either side, and one side gets painted and the other side is the back of the piece. And then there's a cut frame around that's poplar. So this is actually pretty light. It's about 48 inches wide, 55 inches tall. And yeah, I move them around by myself, so they have to be kind of light.
Andrew, sorry for the interruption. Just want to let you know we're getting to that point where we might want to open it up for questions sometime soon.
Okay, I'm going to run through them then. Here's a first ball piece. Actually, this is a piece that it's at the museum. It's not the first ball piece. Start, stop. Just quickly, the piece in the museum was made with 2 pieces. So there's 2 pieces made from 2 separate pieces of wood. There's a light blue wood and a dark blue wood. So I would cut the dark blue strip out and then trace it onto a blue piece of wood and cut that out. So I was able to get 2 pieces from that one idea. Here's another Mary Heilman piece. some sculptures that I like to keep going, that just sort of give me ideas for paintings. And I feel like every artist should have a little secret side thing happening, whether it's a piano in the studio or a guitar or little sculptures. I think having a little break from what you're supposed to be making is always really refreshing. And I don't expect to show any of these or bring them to my gallery. I just make them because they're fun, and I have a lot of discarded pieces of wood to glue together. So it's my little secret. And finally, I'd like to finish with the installation view at the museum. It's a beautiful show. 13 artists, all super different approaches to abstraction, coming together in a beautiful space. Nancy White on the left, James Sterling Pitt, whose work I had been admiring online, in the middle on the pedestal, and myself on the right. And then Pat Boas. I mean, there's so many beautiful works in the show, and I couldn't have been happier to be included. So again, thank you. Thank you, Mel. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, everyone who's made the show possible. And I'll finish up with that.
Thank you, Andrew. If you would like to stop sharing your screen, we will open it up for questions. Anybody at home who would like to ask Andrew a question, you may do so by unmuting yourself and sharing your video to ask directly, or you can type it into the chat and I will read it aloud. And I'll start with a question in the chat from Alan Hicks. The question is, so you didn't have a day job in an automotive paint shop? You just jobbed out the painting to the shop?
Right. I had been, always sort of scouting out paint shops because my studio creates dust, and painting surfaces in there can get a little sketchy and it's smelly. So I thought, why not just hire someone to do it? They know what they're doing better than I do. And they have these huge spray booths that are really well designed for pulling the fumes out of the space.
I have a question, Andrew. So in 2015, was that your first exhibition with Sears Peyton?
No, I had a show before that, in probably 3 years before that. And I just, I just didn't even include work from that show in this presentation because it was, I edited it down a little bit. So I've been with them for a very long time. I would just, while I was working full time at the gallery, at the museum, I would give the gallery a few pieces here and there, and they were able to keep me on. So.
Excellent. Any other questions from anybody at home?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Hi, Andrew. Thanks so much for sharing your work today. And I just have a question about color choices. You shared a little about the automotive pre-made color that you've chosen, but how about the color combinations? And I'm also interested in the color phenomenon that happens in your work, perhaps between the grooves of some of the groove paintings, in terms of the depth and width of the negative space and the line that's created between the panels.
Yeah, well, the shadow is, I guess you're talking about a shadow. Yeah, I guess there's something that happens when you paint on a surface and the surface undulates and has a topography. The paint is an interesting way of flattening everything out, but also showing off the texture or any characteristics the surface might have. So Yeah, I don't know. I mean, as far as color choices goes, it's really, I have a certain number of panels painted, and I keep a flat file of extra pieces of wood, but I don't have an unlimited amount of, I can't mix paint. I don't, when I'm using the automotive surfaces, I don't mix paints like on a palette and add a dab of black or a dab of white. It's basically, what do I have in my drawer? What's in storage? And I'm just like, it's limited. I have like in my studio now, I have like 4 colors, and it's just, I pay a certain amount of money to have each panel painted, and I just kind of use them. So I end up having these strange color choices, right? It's yeah. I don't know what I would do if I had acrylic paint there's so many, it's endless, right?
Thank you, Andrew. I think there was somebody about to ask a question before Kyle's.
Oh, well, I now I have a million questions about the MoMA, but I was wondering, before you commit to a design on wood, do you work things out on paper or pencil, or you just go for it and play with the wood?
I do. I have I should have shown a picture. I have a lot of small pieces of paper hanging on the wall that are ideas, and they started out as sketches, and then it's always changing. Sometimes a piece starts out as a sketch, and sometimes it starts out as a piece of wood that I find on the floor. And it's really, I can't say it's one process. It's really crazy. Like I'm looking for that one process. Let me know if you find it, but I can't. It's like wherever I can find the piece, it's desperate sometimes, it's and sometimes I'm trying to slow down with them. I used to go be really frantic and try and make these pieces, and now I'm just like slowing down so the work is changing. And it's just also a feeling like, oh, I want to make a zigzag. I have a feeling about a zigzag, and like listen to those little whispers, those little inspiration moments. Take them where you can.
Thank you.
Andrew, I have a question in regards to your artist residencies, Vermont Studio Center and MacDowell. It sounds like you participated in those while you were employed at MoMA. How did you negotiate that time off?
Good question. The MacDowell, I was already had left the museum. Vermont, I had been in the museum for about 11 years, and I went up to my boss and I said, the culture of the museum was that there were a lot of artists working in the museum. So they were used to being, occasionally asked for leave of absence, or, somebody was going on tour, they needed a few weeks. So I just went up to my boss and I said, I have this residency I want to go to, and I'd like to go. And, they were willing to be flexible.
Very supportive. We have time for another question at home from anybody. If anybody has a question, you can unmute yourself or type it into the chat. Last chance. Okay, if there are no other questions, Andrew, thank you so much for your time this afternoon, for sharing your work. We really appreciate having you in the exhibition. All the work that Mel Press has done to assemble a wonderful group of artists. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thank you.